environmental policy. It's a matter of thinking about the contested nature of these issues and charting ways forward. And they also said it's too political, of course, for their liking. And I was a bit surprised because I would have thought that was something to be expected. So now actually I say it, to expect it to be about the political nature. Obviously allocating scarce resources is a political thing, and I've got a nice quote coming up about that in terms of if you identify inequality, you really have two choices. One's to do something about it, or one's to ignore it. And in both cases, that's a political decision. There's a focus in terms, of course, about equity, about allocation of resources, and issues such as race, gender and class often dominate how people see the world. Obviously those issues aren't going to go away. I was talking this morning listening to AN and women being quite rightly upset about the gender balance on the process of the 2020 Big Idea Conference in Australia, coming up the Prime Minister's organised. Obviously class issues are also continuing, but I think in the 21st century increasingly issues about equity, issues about conflict are going to be around environmental justice issues. And we're already beginning to have, for example, environmental refugees leaving places in the Pacific. I just want to say something very briefly about some of the geographers that really interested me and influenced me. And at high school, a formative experience was reading this wonderful book by Hugh Stretton called Ideas for Australian Cities. He came and lived in Canberra for a year and wrote this book, and he compared the plan for the planned suburb of Higgins. Anyone live in Botswana? No Higgins? So Higgins had this wonderful plan which involved the capacity of everyone to be able to walk to the school or the shop without crossing the road. And at the last minute that was changed to the current plan where there's a busy road separating most of the suburbs from those areas. He talked about the political decisions, and the book was separating women and children last, in terms of the last minute male planners who were driving cars. Some more handouts here because I've got one. I've never got one. Maybe one person could get them and hand up the other. So at the very last minute, the whole plan was changed to take 60 seconds off the drive to the shops. The selected plan also saved less trees, had less houses facing north, so reducing the possibilities of solar-oriented houses, and the heaviest traffic flows, as I said, past the schools. So it got me thinking about the policy and planning process. And often you see quite strange outcomes, and then we need to go back one step and think about who was involved in making those decisions, what was the process. So again, that's something that I should start thinking about being reflected in this course. I mentioned before geography being about who gets what where. There's a link here again which you can access from the webpage from David Harvey, who's an English-born American-based geographer, who talks about how geographers can't remain neutral. In documenting human and environmental relations, we're always reviewing issues of equity and inequality. As I said, who doesn't get what and why. And then the geographers, as I said, they clearly have an ethical choice, ignoring the implications of their results or trying to do something to rectify this situation. Either choice, so Peter and I have devised, of course, in quite an applied way. We want you to become advocates for better environmental policy and be effective in the workplace afterwards. There's a lot of relevance, and this is going to be the end of the geography course in about 5 minutes. The whole course that I can about becoming a didactic geography lesson. But there's some aspects of geography which I think are particularly pertinent to environmental policy and planning. And once this point made by Roger Croft, that geographers have the technical knowledge, the practical experience, and the ability to bring together the means of managing natural change and human impacts to advise on social processes and physical instruments that can be necessary. So you can see a really integrative approach. They're looking at the biophysical and social. So again, we'll be stressing, of course, that you can't disconnect those. Looking at economic measures to address those issues and also being aware of political processes. So Croft finishes by saying that the kind of skills that geographers need to deal with environmental issues, including understanding the dynamics of change in the regions forward. So if you're managing the Murray-Darling Basin or managing any landscape indeed, you need to think about how that's changed over time. What are you actually managing? Is it a natural environment or is it a human construct? We need to make connections between issues and to recognise independence in the feedbacks that occur. So environmental policy, as some of the reading will give you, is inherently very complex. It's often quite different to other forms of policy. So if you're dealing with species extinction, it's quite a different problem in terms of many policy issues where things aren't going to completely disappear if you don't take the right policy option. Also, environmental politics, I think, it often have much stronger interdependence in terms of different issues. I was struck by an article in the New Scientist recently just talking about the environmental impact of divorce. So you wouldn't sort of think about divorce having an environmental impact, but it's quite a significant impact in terms of different impact on the environment of two household families. And geographers also need to have familiarity with the manipulation of spatial and temporal information, not simply for its own sake, nor for the sake of geographers, but for use by politicians and other decision makers. So one thing we'll be stressing in some of the later lectures, and one thing that some of the former students will come back, it's just the nature of trying to influence people that you're dealing with. And often the best way to do this is to convince your boss, convince someone in the government you're trying to get an idea across to, is that your idea is their idea. And often that's quite contrary to the whole sort of university ethos of plagiarism, where we want you to write this and say you all together. Once you go into the workplace, you're going to find things often quite different. Perhaps the biggest success of all is where your great idea is suddenly your boss, and one's my boss, and he comes back to me and says, I have this great idea, it's exactly your idea, but obviously that is a roundabout way of success in changing the process. And finally, Croft talks about how geographers have to have greater understanding of or greater engagement in social processes and issues. We need to ensure that geographers have political antennae, that they are aware of politics at all levels, including awareness of the subtleties of community issues with different constituencies. So focus often in the course will be about issues of public participation. There's a separate course that Peter and I would highly recommend called Participatory Resource Management being run mid-year. So if you're interested in those kind of issues, make sure you enroll in that course. So the need for geography has been, for geographers and the ability to integrate information has been recognised at many high levels. I met John Kerrin, the former treasurer, a couple of years ago, who was also responsible, who's in the Auckland Keating governments, and he talked about how he was the only person in Parliament, if you excuse the language, you could tell the difference between shit and clay. He had a background as a geographer and a soil scientist. He was trying to get people in Parliament to take environmental issues seriously, which is saying how hard it was, but no one in that Parliament had that kind of training in terms of a capacity to integrate social and environmental issues and understanding the physical environment. And I'll hand over to Pete.
Thanks for Peter, and my welcome to Richard, to you in this course. I had a slide following this one that said John Howard says foresters are important, but I put that out. Not really. So I'm a professor of forestry here at ANU, and I've spent the last 20 years of my life as an academic at Oxford and at ANU working principally on forest policy issues, and forest policy issues are just a subset of the broader environmental policy issues that this course is about, and they're often a particularly challenging subset for reasons that I'll talk about during the course. For the last 10 years, Richard and I and our other colleagues here in the school have been working to bring together different perspectives on the environment to get better outcomes for the environment and sustainability. And this picture of salinity in the Australian landscape, which is a natural phenomenon that's been greatly exacerbated by the way that European immigrant Australians have managed our landscape, as many of you know, is indicative of the sort of impacts that we're having on our continent and a subsample of the set of impacts that we're having on the world. And the impacts of people on the planet have suddenly been realised politically, part of the reason for the change of government in Australia in the last election, hallelujah. And we believe very strongly in the school that to help you address the challenges that your generation faces, ones that our generation has contributed to, and that indeed you're probably contributing to in your consumption patterns, we have to give effect to what Einstein said here in a different context, but I think very relevant to the nature of environmental and sustainability challenges that we face. That the way that we're going to create a future and create a more sustainable future for subsequent generations is by, first of all, thinking